May God add a blessing to the reading and the hearing of this holy word. Will you pray with me? God of love, oil the hinges of our hearts' doors, that they may swing easily open to welcome you. Amen. Alrighty then. It was 2009. A particularly virulent strain of the flu bug was making its way around Connecticut. So my colleague, the senior minister at First Church Simsbury, bought several family-size bottles of Purell and set them at each of the entrances of the sanctuary, and on every bottle he stuck a label that read, "Holy Hand Sanitizer." 10 years later, reports of the coronavirus dominate our headlines, and we all likely know someone who has suffered from the flu this season. Can I see by a show of hands? Flu bugs, or people you know, right? And so we remain hyper-tuned to the importance of washing hands. And who could blame us, any of us, for siding with the Pharisees in this episode? The Pharisees who, according to Mark, thoroughly washed their hands, who furthermore did not eat anything from the market until they washed it, and who washed all their cups and their pots and their kettles. Surely they were merely defending the public good when they called out those disciples for eating with defiled hands. Gross! Didn't your parents teach you better manners? We all know that keeping our hands clean is the best defense against germs. But here's the thing. The Pharisees of Jesus' day, they knew no such thing. According to a quick Google search, microorganisms, they were first discovered in the 1600s by two fellows of the Royal Society, Robert Hooke and Antony van Leeuwenhoek. The Persian scholar, Ibn Sina, had actually proposed a germ theory as early as 1025, but Europe dismissed the idea that microscopic agents could cause disease until well into the 1800s, when Louis Pasteur first arrived on the scene. The point is, friends, ritual cleanliness in first century Palestine had nothing to do with being sanitary. That idea was at least 1,000 years in the future. Cleanness referred not to being germ-free, but rather to being physically and therefore spiritually fit to worship God in the temple. Now, this is difficult for us to wrap our minds around, I know, because when I say unclean, you might think of used tissues, or muddy boots, or a sweat-soaked jersey. But the Greek word that is translated as defiled in the text actually means not dirty per se, and certainly not contaminated, rather ordinary, common, unfit for worship like a pair of paint-covered jeans. There's nothing wrong, nothing untoward about paint-covered jeans. They are entirely appropriate to wear when you are painting something. But you might not wear them to your best friend's wedding, unless your best friend is a fellow artist. The Pharisees, they were faithful Jews who were trying to abide by a strict holiness code as a way of honoring God and fulfilling Torah, or God's law. Nothing Jesus said should be construed as a condemnation of Jewish ritual practice. On the contrary, Jesus himself was a devout Jew, engaged in the very Jewish practice of debating just what constitutes faithful living. But the Pharisees, both the Pharisees and Jesus, looked to the Hebrew Bible for guidance. The Pharisees to the book of Exodus, and Jesus, in this case, to the prophet Isaiah, whom he quotes as follows: "This people honors me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me." Here's the point Jesus was trying to drive home. Faithfulness isn't a matter of the hands at all. It is a matter of the heart. "Listen to me," he said. "There is nothing outside a person that by going in can defile, but the things that come out are what defile." Applying our newfound knowledge, this sentence could be paraphrased: there is nothing outside a person that by going in can make you unholy or unfit to worship God. On the contrary, it's what comes from the heart that will either disrupt or deepen your connection to the divine. Let's take that first part first. Embedded in that first line is the best kind of good news. It goes well beyond that extra slice of cake you ate when no one was looking. If you have ever felt oppressed by voices that limit, belittle, or dismiss you, if you have borne the brunt of ridicule, overt or implied, if you've been the victim of stereotypes or the target of bullies, then consider this: none of the stuff out there that gets said or done to you makes you any less holy in God's sight, any less worthy of God's love. Friends, if you have ever been made to feel ashamed because of your size or the shape of your body, because you are a man who cries during Coke commercials, or a woman who dares to get angry in public, if anyone has ever told you that you are not fit for God's house because your clothes look too shabby, or you love the wrong gender, or your marriage has fallen apart, if you have ever been called damaged goods because someone has hurt, abused, or assaulted you, then hear this: none of that can touch your God-given goodness. Like food that goes in the mouth and then out the other end and into the sewer, those attempts to deny you your full humanity and integrity are nothing but a load of, well, you know what I mean. As icky as it can feel to be reduced to labels, as devastating to be denied the right of self-determination, as hard as it can be not to let the distorted views of others sink into your psyche until they erode your sense of self, those judgy words and hurtful actions, they cannot defile you. As far as God is concerned, you are whole and holy. Period. Full stop. So take a deep breath. Allow that promise to soak in. Trust it. And then let's look at the second half of what Jesus said. The part about what comes from inside. Jesus rattles off a list, a long and uncomfortable list of all kinds of evil intentions: theft, murder, adultery, greed, deceit, licentiousness, envy, slander, pride. all of which have at least one thing in common. They are all self-centered, self-serving behaviors, all impulses fueled by my wants, with no regard for the damage I can cause to others. Friends, this is what threatens to contaminate a life of faith. Not our intake, but our output. Hardship and heartbreak are unavoidable in life. No depth of religious devotion will inoculate us from suffering and sorrow. The question is, what do we do with the pain that we feel? Theologian Robert Rohr suggests that we have two options. We either transmit it or we transform it. Transmission is what happens when we allow our hardship to turn us hard-hearted, to paraphrase the Archbishop Desmond Tutu. When we lose our capacity for compassion. Maybe you've been on the receiving end of someone else's pain, exposed to their bad mood and infected by their deep hurts. Maybe you know what it feels like to be contaminated by someone else's suffering. And if you are human, you've probably been on the other side of that equation too. Letting your own sadness or distress spill out in ways you did not intend and may wish you could take back. So the question is, how do we contain those outbreaks? How do we protect against a chronic case of hard-heartedness?